Introduction 4 is liberal view of other religions. Faith in all prophets. There is a very general and very deep-rooted misconception that Al-Qur'an preaches intolerance and that Muhammad preached his faith with the sword in one hand and the Qur'an in the other. Misrepresentation could go no further. The basic principle of Islam, a faith in all the prophets of the world, is enough to give the lie to this allegation. The great and liberal mind that preached not only love and respect for the founders of the great religions of the world, actually condemned all the founders of religions, but the prophets that people bring up, the prophets and messiahs that people bring up as the basis of which they're founding a religion on, we, accept that, is enough to give the lie to allegation. The great and liberal mind that preached not only love and respect, but much more than that. Faith in them could not shrink to the narrowness of intolerance for those very religions. Well, because they're going to contain some of the teachings and practices that are part of that legacy, at the very least. Tolerance is not, in fact, the word that can sufficiently indicate the breadth of the attitude of Islam towards other religions. It preaches equal love for all, equal respect for all, and equal faith in all. It preaches judge people according to their actual beliefs and deeds. It doesn't say, because certainly in paths that have deviated to some extent or another, you're going to have different levels of evil and ignorance. You're also going to have different levels of good and truth. No compulsion in religion. Again, intolerance could not be ascribed to a book which altogether excludes compulsion from the sphere of religion. There's no compulsion in religion. 256. It lays down in the clearest words. In fact, the Holy Qur'an is full of statements showing that belief in this or that religion is a person's own concern, and that he is given the choice of adopting one way or another, that if he accepts truth, it is for his own good, and that if he sticks to error, it is to his own detriment. I give below a few of these quotations. We have shown him the way. He may be thankful or unthankful. 76:3. The truth is from your Lord, so let him who wishes believe, and let him who wishes disbelieve. 1829. Indeed, there have come to you clear proofs from your Lord. Whoever will, therefore, see, it is for the good of his own soul, and whoever will disbelieve, it shall be against himself. 605. If you do good, you will do good for your own souls. And if you do evil, it shall be for them. 17:7. Why fighting was allowed. The Muslimin were allowed to fight, indeed, but what was the object? Not to compel the unbelievers to accept Islam, for it was against all the broad principles in which they had hitherto been brought up. Well, brought up implies they're raised, and a lot of those people weren't Muslim until they were older. But you know what I mean. Like, out of the four things that there's a Hadith Qudsi that points out that the curse of Allah is upon those who fight, just, to extend the borders. Those whose purpose of fighting is to gain the spoils of war. Those whose purpose to fight is to acquire slaves. Those whose purpose to fight is to force conversion. And Shia and Sunni both have that, by the way. I don't remember the narrator at the time, but no, it was to establish religious freedom, to stop all religious persecution, to protect the houses of worship of all religions, mosques among them, and of course the minorities thereof. Here are a few quotations. And had there not been God's repelling some people by others, there would have been pulled down cloisters and churches and synagogues and mosques, in which God's name is much remembered. 22:40. And fight against them until there is no more persecution, and religion is only for Allah. 2:193. And remember the system of judgment. So certainly the outer law of the state would be according to Islamically sound terms. It's not that they've, it's like the battle, and they're going to have a system where the punishments and stuff aren't the punishments of or limits or whatnot of God. That doesn't make sense. And fight. It doesn't make sense for them to not set up an Islamic government when they win a battle. And fight against them until there's no more persecution, and all religions should be for God. 8:39. And the Islamic State, of course, will not promote faiths other than Islam. But again, it's not fighting people because they're of a different faith. Under what conditions was permission to fight given to the Muslimin? Every student of Islamic history knows that the Holy Prophet and his companions were subjected to the severest persecution as Islam began to gain ground at Mecca. Over 100 of them fled to Abyssinia, but persecution grew still more relentless. Ultimately, the Muslimin had to take refuge in Medina, but they were not left alone even there, and the sword was taken up by the enemy to annihilate Islam and the Muslimin. The Qur'an bears express testimony to this. Permission to fight is given to those upon whom war is made, because they are oppressed, and Allah is well able to assist them. Those who have been expelled from their homes without a just cause, except that they say, "Our Lord is Allah." 29, 39, and 40. Later, the express condition was laid down. And fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you, and do not exceed the limits, for Allah loves not those who exceed the limits. 290. And obviously that first verse that was learned would have been the limits, right? Al-Quran therefore allowed fighting only to save a persecuted community from powerful oppressors, and hence the condition was laid down. The fighting was to be stopped as soon as persecution ceased. But if they desist, then Allah is forgiving, merciful, and fight against them until there is no more persecution. 292 and 193. If the enemy offered peace, peace was to be accepted, although the enemy's intention might be only to deceive the Muslimin. And if they incline to peace, do thou incline to it, and trust in Allah. He is the hearing, the knowing. If they intend to deceive thee, then surely Allah is sufficient for thee. 8:61 and 62. The Prophet made treaties of peace with his enemies. One such treaty brought about the famous truce of Hudaybiyah, the terms of which were not only disadvantageous, but also humiliating to the Muslimin. According to the terms of this treaty, if an unbeliever being converted to Islam went over to the Muslimin, he was to be returned. But if a Muslim went over to the unbelievers, he was not to be given back to the Muslimin. This clause of the treaty cuts to the root of all allegations of the use of force by the Holy Prophet. It also shows the strong conviction of the Holy Prophet that neither would Muslimin go back to unbelief, nor would the new converts to Islam be deterred from embracing Islam, because the Prophet gave them no shelter. And these expectations proved true. For a while, not a single Muslim deserted Islam. A large number came over to Islam and, being refused shelter at Medina, formed a colony of their own in a neutral territory. It is a mistake to suppose that the conditions related above were abrogated at any time. The condition to fight against those who fought against you remained in force to the last. The last expedition led by the Holy Prophet was the famous Tabuk expedition, and every historian of Islam knows that. Though the Prophet had marched a very long distance to Tabuk at the head of an army, 30,000 yet, when he found that the enemy did not fulfill the condition laid down above, he returned and did not allow his troops to attack the enemy territory. Nor is there a single direction in the latest revelation on this subject. In chapter 9, the immunity that goes against this condition, the opening verse of that chapter speaks expressly of idolaters with whom you made an agreement. And then verse 4 accepts from its purview. Those are the idolaters with whom you made an agreement, when they have not failed you in anything, and have not backed up anyone against you, thus showing clearly that the immunity related only to such idolatrous tribes as had first made agreements with the Muslimin, and then violating them, killed and persecuted the Muslimin wherever they had found them, as verse 10 states expressly. They pay no regard to ties of relationship, nor to those of covenant in the case of a believer. Such people are also spoken of in an earlier revelation. Those with whom thou makest an agreement, then they break their agreement every time, and they keep not their duty. 8:56. Further on in chapter 9, the condition of the enemy attacking the Muslimin first is plainly repeated. What? Will you not fight a people who broke their oaths and aimed at the expulsion of the messenger, and they attacked you first? 9:13. So, from the first to the last, the Holy Qur'an allowed fighting only against those who fought the Muslimin first. It allowed expressly only fighting in defense, without which the Muslimin could not live, and it clearly forbade aggressive war. The waging of war on unbelievers to compel them to accept Islam is a myth, pure and simple, and by myth, of course, the lie, not the biblical use of the word myth. That shows the separation that the West has from the Bible, the fact that they consider myth as like some sort of lie, when in the Bible, the only passage you point at where there's a bad myth, at least the one that people talk about, maybe there's another, but cleverly, made up myths. So there's myths that aren't made up, basically implied in that statement alone. But yeah, pure and simple, a thing unknown to the Quran. It was the enemy that waged war on the Muslimin to turn them away from their religion, as the Holy Book so clearly asserts. And they will not cease fighting against you until they turn you back from your religion, if they can. 2:217. Relations of friendship with others. It is sometimes asserted that the Quran forbids relations of friendship with the followers of other religions. How could a book which allows a man to have as his comrade in life a woman following another religion, 5:5, say in the same breath that no friendly relations can be had with followers of other religions? Well, the wife is of good reputation and certainly a certain degree of good behavior and stuff too. So, say in this, the loving relation of husband and wife is the friendliest of all relations, and when this is expressly permitted, there is not the least reason to suppose that other friendly relations are forbidden. The fact is that wherever there is prohibition against making friends with other people, it relates only to the people who were at war with the Muslimin, and this is plainly stated in Al-Quran. God forbids you not respecting those who have not made war against you on account of your religion, and have not driven you forth from your homes, that you show them kindness, and deal with them justly, for Allah loves the doers of justice. Allah forbids you respecting only those who made war upon you on account of your religion and drove you forth from your homes and backed up others in your expulsion, that you should make friends with them. And whoever makes friends with them, these are the unjust. 8 and 9 of Surah 60. No punishment for apostasy. Oh, they should have brought up the biblical passages that do have that punishment as a contrast, or some other faith, which there's a bunch that you can point out. Another widely prevailing misconception may be noted here. It is generally thought that the Qur'an provides a death sentence for those who desert the religion of Islam. Anyone who takes the trouble to read the Qur'an will see that there is not the least ground for such a supposition. The Qur'an speaks repeatedly of people going back to unbelief after believing, but never once does it say that they should be killed or punished. I give here a few quotations. And whoever of you turns back from his religion, then he dies while an unbeliever. These it is whose deeds go for nothing in this world and in the hereafter. 2:217. O you who believe, should one of you turn back from his religion, that Allah will bring a people whom he shall love, and they too shall love him. 5:54. Those who disbelieve after their believing then increase in disbelief, their repentance shall not be accepted, and these are they that go astray. 3:89. On the other hand, the Quran speaks of a plan of Jews to adopt Islam first and then desert it, thus creating the impression that Islam was not a religion worth having. 3:71. Such a scheme could never have entered into their heads while living at Medina, where the government was Muslim, if apostasy, according to the Quranic law, were punishable with death. The misconception seems to have been risen from the fact that people who, after becoming apostates, joined the enemy, were treated as enemies, or that, where an apostate took the life of a Muslim, he was put to death for not changing his religion, but for committing murder. And I guess, I could get a real knife here, but let me make a point here by sharing about 2 verses. And so this first verse, and I'll leave it as a mystery, but you know what I'm talking about. When thy إذ يوحي ربك الملائكة أني معكم فثبتوا الذين آمنوا سألقي في قلوب الذين كفروا رعبا فاضربوا فوق الأعناق واضربوا منهم كل بنان. And another very important verse that people will bring up to make points that if the verse itself doesn't prove it enough to them, there's certainly the context that proves it's not what they say. فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ حَتَّى إِذَا أثخنتموهم فشدوا الوثاق فإما منا بعد وإما فداء حتى تبدأ الحرب أوزارها
yasha'ullahu lantasara minhum walakin وبعدكم ببعد والذين قتلوا في سبيل